Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec, where we talk about how to perform, lead, and live with clarity, calm, and confidence, even when life feels like it's coming apart at the seams. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, forensic psychologist, executive and resilience coach, and someone who has spent more than 2 decades helping people navigate high-stakes conflict, toxic relationship dynamics, and the psychological blind spots that derail even the most capable leaders. Before we dive in, if these episodes are resonating with you and you want tools to go deeper, I highly suggest you check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer: From Conflict to Clarity, a no-nonsense guide to managing conflict in every relationship. It includes over 75 exercises, reflective tools, and neuroscience-backed strategies that help you spot dysfunction faster, regulate your responses, and strengthen your boundaries. Grab your copy on Amazon today. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, today we're diving into a topic that hits so many intelligent, accomplished people right in the gut. Why do smart people, especially smart people, miss red flags? This episode is called Why Smart People Miss Red Flags: Cognitive Biases That Keep You Stuck. And trust me, by the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly why you didn't see it sooner, and why that does not mean anything is wrong with you. I'm going to begin by talking about the myth of if I were smarter, I would have seen it. So let's start by dismantling one of the most powerful and painful and misguided beliefs I hear from clients. I should have known better. This belief is emotionally loaded with shame, self-blame, confusion. But here's the truth, backed by decades of behavioral science and forensic psychology. Intelligence does not protect you from manipulation or red flags or toxic dynamics. In fact, research from Dr. Daniel Kahneman from 2011 and Dr. Dan Ariely out of Duke in 2008 shows that smart people can be more susceptible to cognitive biases precisely because they trust their reasoning abilities. Being smart doesn't make you immune. Sometimes it can make you overconfident and therefore more vulnerable to blind spots. If you missed the red flags, it wasn't because you were stupid. It was because you were human and your brain was doing exactly what brains do. So let's talk about what brains do. And really, it comes down to the cognitive biases that blind you and how that operates. Here are the psychological mechanisms that keep even brilliant people stuck. And I have 8 of them. These are all different types of bias that we bring to our everyday life. We bring them to work, we bring them to relationships. Certainly, if you are in research of some kind, or if you're an expert witness, you probably have dealt with various types of bias because it comes in to research design and it comes in to scientist practitioner opinions and so on. But I'm going to go through 8 and we're going to unpack these a little. And the first, many of us have probably heard of, is confirmation bias. And this is, again, referenced extensively by Kahneman and Nickerson. Confirmation bias is when your brain seeks evidence that supports what you want to believe. So if you believe they're a good partner, or my boss supports me, or this friend has my best interest at heart, you unconsciously ignore contradictory evidence. Red flags don't disappear, you just don't register them. So in a way, you're seeing them, but you're interpreting them consistent with what you want to believe. That's confirmation bias. Second is optimism bias. Shiro in 2011 coined this term in research that they did with colleagues. Intelligent people often believe in self-improvement, their own potential, a growth mindset, and the concept of redemption. When you believe in all those, it creates an unconscious bias towards minimizing danger and maximizing the possibility that the person didn't mean it or just need support. Or it's understandable why they did this because of their background, but this won't happen again. So there's a certain optimism bias that can affect you there. The third bias is sunk cost fallacy. And this comes from the research of Arks and Bloomer from the mid 1980s. This goes back a ways. And this one speaks to the more time, energy, or emotion that you invest in someone, the harder it becomes to walk away. Your brain thinks, I put too much into this to leave now. This is why people stay in bad jobs, toxic relationships, and manipulative friendships far longer than they should. This also has a direct correlation to cognitive dissonance, which is the idea that when we believe in something and then we get evidence to the contrary, it creates a dissonance in our concepts of what we believed in and the fact that there's new evidence suggesting that what we believed in wasn't accurate. We see this in politics all the time. You support a certain candidate. The candidate, then certain things come to light about that candidate, making them a bad person, or that they've been committed of a crime, or they're guilty of some heinous kind of act. And then we're stuck with this notion of, well, I really believe in them. I'm a huge fan. And yet I've got this new evidence that suggests that they're not a good person. How do I reconcile that? And all too often, the way people reconcile that is they almost engage in a sunk cost fallacy, where they basically say, listen, well, I dove in and I supported this candidate for all these years. I put bumper stickers on my car. I put a sign on my front yard. I can't pull out now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-engineer my thought process to explain away their deficits. It's very similar to the sunk cost fallacy. The next one is the halo effect. Thorndike and researchers coined this term way back in the 1920s. If someone is charming, successful, attractive, or confident, your brain generalizes those traits into assumed goodness. This is a major reason why psychopaths and narcissists often slip under the radar. Their charm distorts perception of the red flags. Now, you don't need all these qualities. It could be someone that's charming or successful or just attractive or just confident. And we tend to then assume if that's a positive quality they have, all these other positive qualities must be in play as well. It's like they have a halo on one quality, so all these other qualities must be present. And it creates a bias. Fifth, emotional reasoning. Aaron Beck coined this in the 1970s as part of being the father of cognitive behavioral therapy. And in this type of bias, you mistake feelings for facts. So if someone feels familiar, if they feel warm, exciting, intense, you assume it means that they're good for you. And then you discredit or ignore or dispel any negative data that's coming in that suggests they're not good for you because you're going with your feelings. But often that feeling is old trauma being activated. It's the familiarity of what you're used to. It's not a true indication that they're a good person. I talked about this extensively in the prior episode. If you didn't listen to that one, go back and take a listen. So it's not true compatibility. It's that old trauma, those old toxic patterns being activated. 6, attachment bias blind spots. A lot of researchers here. This goes back to the work of Bowlby in the 1960s and more recently, Mickelson and Shaver from the late 2000s. People with anxious or disorganized attachment styles often misinterpret red flags as passion, intensity, chemistry, urgency, or even meant to be energy, right? They view these red flags as we're meant to be together for these reasons. We're soulmates. The red flags feel like home because we're used to it. We're used to push-pull. We're used to reward and punishment. We're used to attachment and detachment. It's familiar to us. And so we don't view it as dangerous. We view it as familiar. I once treated a young child, maybe 8 years old, who said something that has stuck in my brain for literally 20 years now. And he said, you know what? At first, I didn't like getting hit by my dad. And he would get beat by his father. It was clearly neglect, physical abuse, and so on. And he said, but now I don't mind it so much because the physical pain goes away. I can handle it. But he's like, at least I know he's paying attention to me when he's hitting me. Think about that for a minute. That is a young boy who now is a young man, because that was 20 years ago, who the familiarity, it felt like home. It felt like attention. It was attention in a way. And he was trading off that for, I'll take it. I'll take the attention because if he's not hitting me and yelling at me, he's ignoring me. So I'll take it. Again, not healthy, not adaptive, but that red flag feels like home. It feels familiar. Seventh bias is cognitive dissonance. I mentioned it earlier, but I want to talk about it. Festinger coined this in the mid to late 1950s in the research that he did. It's the discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs. They love me and they hurt me. And it's so strong that you resolve the tension by ignoring the threat. So I gave you an example earlier about politics, right? I like this candidate. This candidate was just accused of sexual harassment or a sexual violation. I'm going to choose to downplay the sexual abuse because I want to keep intact my belief of liking the candidate. In this case, and I'll bring up examples of people that are in abusive relationships. They love me, but they also hurt me. They might be doing genuine things in some ways where I do feel loved, and yet they turn around and they hurt me. That classic narcissistic push-pull pattern. And so I choose to hang on to the they love me part, and I forget about, or I downplay the they hurt me part. Eighth bias is competence bias. Simon and Chabris did some research on this in the 1990s. And what this refers to is that smart people often assume I'm good at reading people or I'm too savvy to be manipulative. So in other words, if we are bright and we are competent and we're smart or we're good in our field, we wear that like an air of confidence. And that makes us feel a bit invulnerable to being manipulated or taken advantage of. And it creates a false confidence. And that blinds you to subtle manipulation. So we want to be on guard for the competence bias as well. So at the same time, you also can be misled by emotional intelligence itself. And I want to take a minute to kind of unpack this. And this is another surprising truth, which is highly empathetic, emotionally intelligent people often miss red flags more than others. Why? Why is that? It's because emotional intelligence makes you good at perspective taking, skilled at forgiveness, excellent at understanding motives. You're prone to giving the benefit of the doubt. You're naturally conflict avoidant, and you invest in harmony. That's what you want. You want peace. You want harmony. You want to make the peace. Dr. Jennifer Freed did some research on betrayal blindness in the mid-1990s. And she showed that people often ignore red flags from those they depend on emotionally or socially, not because they're weak, but because seeing the truth is too threatening. They don't want to acknowledge the truth. This is especially common in certain types of roles, such as caretakers, therapists, teachers, executives, high performers, people pleasers, and of course, survivors of childhood emotional neglect. Your strengths become the doorway through which toxic people enter and learn to keep you at bay and hold you and manipulate you. Again, I talked quite a bit about this in the last episode. You might want to go back and check that one out. But if you're an emotionally intelligent person, you have to be a bit on guard that some of the strengths of that emotional intelligence aren't working against you in toxic relationships. So another variable that comes into play is social conditioning, why you were never taught to see red flags. And here's the ugly truth. And again, between my therapy and my coaching and my workplace violence consultation as a forensic psychologist that I've done over 20 some years, I've seen over 1,000 people. And I, with confidence, can say less than 5% of them were sat down at the age of 8 or 10 or 12 and taught by their parents how to see red flags and how to be emotionally intelligent in relationships. I had wonderful parents. They were very loving and very caring. They didn't do that. It wasn't part of the social makeup. And maybe if you had a therapist as a parent, maybe you got that, but most of us didn't. So most of us were conditioned explicitly or implicitly to be polite, be forgiving, keep the peace, ignore discomfort, give second chances, minimize confrontation, and tolerate inconsistency. Most of us are taught a variation of those is or equals a good person. Combine that with cultural messages like everyone deserves love, no one is perfect, don't be judgmental, and you have a recipe for systemic red flag blindness, especially for women. And there's research that shows Rudman and Glick from 2001, they have some very clear research that shows that social penalties for assertiveness reinforce ignoring early warning signs. So this happens more with women still in our society than men, where a man who's assertive is seen as having executive presence. A woman is seen as being bossy or being emotionally irrational, or in some cases referred to as just the B word, right? I'm not agreeing with any of that, but we are seeing, and to this day, we still see those cultural norms. So, especially for women, there can be social penalties for assertiveness. And the problem there then is it reinforces ignoring early warning signs. So, we want to be cautious of that. So, how do toxic people actually exploit these biases? How do they use them against us? Well, psychopaths, narcissists, Machiavellian personalities, and high conflict individuals intuitively sense these biases. They, as part of their own pathology, as part of their own way of coping through the world, over time, they've learned to spot these and pick up on them intuitively. They exploit them in a number of ways: moving relationships forward too fast, creating emotional intensity. So they love bomb, they overwhelm, presenting a curated persona. They're very polished, they're very confident, they're very in touch with their own sense of self worth. They offer intermittent reinforcement. We talked about that earlier. They test small boundaries early. So they're testing your values, they're testing your boundaries, they're testing your authenticity. Weaponizing empathy, mirroring your values back to you, but not in a way that's truly genuine, in a way where they're using it for data and they're using it to manipulate. And then escalating only after you're invested. So the only time they start showing you their bad side is once you're hooked, once you're invested in the relationship. The research on psychopathy shows that these individuals seek out and manipulate empathically warm, conflict averse individuals. It's not your intelligence that attracts them. It's your emotional warmth, and what they see are the cognitive blind spots. They see you as easily manipulated and able to prey on. So it's important that we're aware of these and we're aware of them as we get deeper into the relationship. Let me give you a case example. This is what I recall the CEO who never saw it coming. So I consulted with a CEO once, and I'm just going to call him Daniel. He had an Ivy League MBA. He was a brilliant strategist, but he repeatedly hired toxic executives who later betrayed him. And then he would have to go through a lot of energy to move that person out of the organization, go find another high level, high performing executive, bring them in, orient them, get them up to speed. And every time that happened, his business lost traction. It lost momentum. In his own words, he said, "I thought I could read people. I thought I was too smart to be fooled." He wasn't fooled because he was stupid. In fact, quite the opposite. He was quite brilliant. He was fooled because he trusted charm. He valued confidence. He ignored discomfort. He believed in potential. He avoided conflict. And he misread intensity as passion. And those are good qualities for a high performing executive: charm, confidence, the ability to manage discomfort, believing in potential, trying to avoid conflict in a reasonable manner. Those are good qualities. But for him, they were used against him. And once we unpacked his biases in the coaching work that we did, he changed not only who he was and how he viewed the world, but he changed who he hired. And his entire leadership team began to stabilize because they no longer had the toxic element. Awareness changed everything. So you might be wondering, George, this is great intel. It's great information. I love the part about biases. And hopefully you're seeing how in your own life you have used or fell into some of these biases. But you are probably wondering at a very practical level, okay, what do I do about this? How do I start seeing red flags earlier so I don't get so caught up into these situations? Well, I got you. 6 recommendations. Number 1, replace giving somebody the benefit of the doubt with the benefit of observation. You don't assume bad intent, but you also don't fill in the gaps with fantasy. So no one's saying go out there and distrust everybody. That's not healthy. That's not helpful. You're going to cut off a lot of very good relationships if that's what you're doing. You might even cut off the opportunity for love again. And this is something I have to work a lot with my separated and divorced clients on, is this notion of they don't want to give the benefit of the doubt, so they cut everybody off and they're totally distrusting. That's maladaptive. That's not helpful. Instead, pivot to benefit of observation. So I'm not going to assume bad intent, but I'm also not going to assume good intent. I'm going to quote an old Ronald Reagan quote, trust but verify. That's what benefit observation is. I'm choosing to trust you as we begin our relationship, but I'm going to verify at every step what you're saying and what you're doing, and are your words and your actions aligned? That's the key part. Number 2, slow down the tempo. Toxic people move fast because they want to get the hook, they want to get the control, and they want to get out of the relationship what they're looking for to serve them. When you slow the pace, their mask begins to slip. You are able to see behind the curtain, and the red flags become more prominent. So slow down the tempo. What's the rush? Number 3, ask yourself, how does this person handle no? How do they handle rejection? How do they handle negatives? Red flags always reveal themselves the moment you set a boundary. Remember, I said earlier, they're going to want to push your boundaries. And I talked about this in the last episode as well, that you may want to go back and listen to. But they want to push boundaries because they want to push control. But they're not doing it in a way that's aligned with what your priorities or values are. They're doing it only in a way that's aligned with what they want. So when you set boundaries, they do not handle them well. So I'm not saying you say no all the time. That's not a healthy beginning to a relationship either. But pick your boundaries based on your values and your priorities, but be in tune to how they handle that and how they respond to that. Number 4, track patterns or behaviors, not apologies. Psychopaths and narcissists apologize beautifully. They're good at it. They're convincing. They're super manipulative. I'm a forensic psychologist, and I have been fooled by narcissists and psychopaths in my life, both professionally and even personally. But behavior tells the truth. I have a saying in the forensic world, behavior never lies. Over time, behavior always shows itself. Somebody will always show their ass in their behavior versus what they say or what they apologize for. And what you want is you want the behavior to be in alignment with the words that they give you. Number 5, build micro boundaries. So you could use small tests, things like delay a response, soft no's, which, hey, thank you so much for the invite. I'm not going to go to that. I have other priorities that I have to do. I promised a girlfriend I would go to a brunch, and I'm going to honor that commitment. But thanks for asking. Small requests that they might ask, which are a way to test the waters to see if you will break boundaries. Make sure you're building those micro boundaries and you're setting them firmly, and then see how they react. Number 6, reconnect with your body. And what I really mean there is reconnect with your nervous system, because your nervous system often notices the red flag well before your mind accepts it. So be connected to your body. For me, it's physical activity. I like to work out. I like to run. I like to bike. I also just like to meditate. And I focus on body scanning. So I'm in tune with what my body is feeling. It's so easy this day and age to get up in our head. It's important to be in tune with your body. So if your body feels tense, confused, anxious, or rushed, or feelings of guilt, take a step, stop, breathe. Your intuition is speaking to you. Try to connect. What is that feeling about? Is it about some upcoming work issue, or is it in relation to this relationship and something that feels off or unhinged about the relationship? So let me give you a few closing reflections. Remember, and I opened with this, missing red flags doesn't mean that you're naive or you're weak or you're stupid or unintelligent or that you're even codependent. And that's another thing that flies around social media a lot these days is if you missed a red flag, you're automatically codependent or you have an attachment problem. Bullshit. You might, but most of that is pseudoscience bullshit from people claiming to be coaches or clinicians. Red flags do not necessarily mean any of those things. It means your brain was doing what human brains do. It means your heart was open. You were vulnerable. You were excited. You were hopeful and you were trusting. Congratulations, you're fucking human. Welcome to the human race. It means you were hopeful. It means you believed in people. It means you saw the good even when it wasn't necessarily there. And yes, maybe you were suspect to a number of biases that I reflected on today. But that's not a flaw because if you are going to be in a healthy relationship, you need to do all those things. Otherwise, you're never going to be in a healthy relationship. It's just that you applied those things to the wrong relationship that was manipulative, right? So all the things I just mentioned, those are strengths, but they need boundaries. The work now is not to become cynical or guarded or jaded. The work is to become discerning. And I talked about discernment in the last episode, and I believe early in this one, discerning what makes sense, what feels right, and what doesn't. What evidence lines up with the person's words and intentions, and what behaviors or evidence does not. You are discerning between the good and the bad. And now you're no longer unconscious. Discernment is very much a conscious exercise. You are consciously reflecting. And that's where we want to get to. So keep that in mind as you go forward, that discernment is the key here. If today's conversation hit home and you're ready to take the next step from insight to action, I highly recommend check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, From Conflict to Clarity, a no-nonsense guide to managing conflict in every relationship. It's a practical, no BS guide for breaking reactive patterns, strengthening boundaries, and transforming how you navigate conflict internally and externally. It's now available on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, a quick call to action. Insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into movement and stress into strategy, coaching can be the catalyst. Coaching will change you. Reach out to set up a free consultation. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Now. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolias, the Unstressed Exec. Thanks for listening. See you soon. And remember, shift happens.